Escobar's body was taken to the morgue, where it was identified by his mother.
He did and arrested him. He's wanted in the United States, and the Mexican government has said it will start formal extradition proceedings, although legal experts have indicated.
May 8th, 2008, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, one of the most feared drug lords in history, unleashed a brutal attack on a rival gang. This resulted in the shooting of Edgar Guzman with an AK-47 in the parking lot of a shopping mall, killing him instantly. Here are 5 times drug lords messed with the wrong gangsters. It's 1975. Griselda shot her husband because she was made to believe he was stealing money from her. And in 1983, she had her 3rd husband assassinated after he left Miami with their child. These and many other gruesome killings made by Griselda put her in the bad books of rival gangs and brightened her spotlight on the map of the authorities. Born February 14, 1943, in Santa Marta, Colombia, Griselda's innocent life only lasted for a short while before she moved to Medellin with her mother, Ana Blanco, at the age of 3. There, she was exposed to a life of crime, which disrupted her mentality at an early age. As horrible as this may sound, at the age of 11, Blanco allegedly kidnapped and attempted to ransom a young boy from an upscale flatland neighborhood near her home in Colombia, whom she eventually killed when she felt the parents of the boy were not taking her seriously. And before the age of 13, she would already be picking pockets. It was bad enough that her mother's boyfriend sexually abused her, and in a bid to escape, she would run away from home at 19 and resorted to stealing in Medellin until she was 20. It was speculated at that time she had resorted to prostitution for financial support, even though she eventually denied that. In 1964, she migrated to the U.S., illegally, with fake papers, and under an alias, settling in Queens, New York, with her husband and 3 children. It was here that her journey to being the cocaine godmother began, as she immediately set up a thriving drug operation. However, the drug business didn't get very far at first, because in April 1975, she was indicted on federal drug conspiracy charges, alongside 30 of her subordinates, and in a bid to avoid conviction, she fled back to Colombia. Normally, the idea of the first conviction would make some withdraw, changing their ways in trade. Not Blanco. Instead, in her solemn resolve to continue and expand her cocaine empire, she went back to the U.S. and transferred her cocaine operations to Miami in the late 70s. It was here that she fully attained and emerged as the full-blown monster everyone knew her to be, transporting narcotics from New York to Southern California from 1970 to the early 2000s. The Black Widow, as she was known, ruled the world of cocaine and violence with an iron fist, a world where men were said to be dominant. She rose her business to new heights, becoming the largest importer at that time. The scary part about this era was that she was involved in and probably spearheaded the full-blown drug-related war known as the Cocaine Cowboy Wars, which were between the late 70s and early 90s. You see, in the 80s, Griselda painted the town red and white, with blood and cocaine everywhere. Her trademarked method of exterminating whoever she wanted to involved a drive-by with a motorcycle. She was the kind of person who would kill another simply because she didn't feel like paying off her debt. Blanco, on her own, brought about the gruesome murder of around 40 to 250 people, which included some personal ones like the killing of her 2 husbands. At the zenith of operations, Blanco's distribution in the U.S. brought in the sum of $80 million per month. Her flow of income was so much that the cocaine profits were put into banks, and the banks themselves would loan the money out to businesses, home buyers, and developers. In more ways than none, Griselda's drug money changed the landscape of cities like South Florida. She would break the glass ceiling of female drug traffickers and was so powerful that even the likes of Pablo Escobar revered her as the boss of the Medellin cartel. In the words of a reporter, "If it wasn't for Griselda Blanco, there would be no Pablo Escobar." It's 1984, and after being targeted by gangs she had trampled on and fearing for her life, Blanco moved to California. Unfortunately, by 1985 she was arrested in her house and was found guilty of manufacturing, importing, and distributing cocaine. It was after the testimony of her hitman and alleged gangster, Jorge Ayala, also known as Rivi, that Blanco was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and was to spend 2 decades behind bars. It would be now that the seeds of her brutal action against rival gangs began to sprout fruits of dismay for her children, as it was during her prison sentence that 3 of her sons were killed, leaving only Michael Corleone. After she was released from prison, she was deported back to Colombia, where she planned to live a normal life, but her luck had run out. On September 3, 2012, an aged Griselda Blanco and her pregnant daughter-in-law were buying meat at the Cardoso Butcher Shop, situated at the intersection of 29th Street and Medellin. As she exited, mimicking her very own assassination style, an unknown motorcycle rider shot her twice, ending the reign of she who was once known as La Madrina, the Black Widow, and the Cocaine Godmother.
Don Pablo Escobar.
This man, regarded as the king of cocaine, Pablo Escobar was the driving force behind the Medellin cartel, controlling the vast majority of the cocaine trafficked into the U.S. during the 80s and early 90s. However, his brutal reign of terror brought about the formation of a dangerous gang that not only ended his drug career, but took him to his very own demise. Born back on December 1st, 1949, in Rio Negro, Colombia, Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria grew up in a middle-class family, with his father being a farmer and mother being a school teacher. Ambitious from a young age, Escobar reportedly began his criminal career in his teen years, engaging in petty street scams, selling fake diplomas, and even stealing tombstones to resell them. By the early 70s, Escobar had graduated to more serious crimes, like smuggling and dealing in contraband, which would lay the groundwork for his future in the drug trade. But it wasn't until the mid-70s that Escobar entered the booming cocaine trade. He initially smuggled small amounts of cocaine into the U.S. through various methods, including hidden compartments in planes and boats, until he decided to expand his operations by building laboratories in Colombia, where coca leaves were processed into cocaine, after which he established an efficient distribution network. So by the late 70s, Escobar had formed the Medellin cartel, a powerful, ruthless drug trafficking organization that would grow rapidly, controlling the majority of the cocaine trade and making billions of dollars annually. Escobar's wealth became legendary. At the height of his power, he was estimated to be worth over $30 billion, making him one of the world's richest men at the time. Now, with wealth comes power, and for Escobar, his immense wealth and influence allowed him to wield significant power in Colombia. He adopted a very simple strategy known as plata o plomo, silver or lead, meaning that individuals could either accept his bribes or face assassination. Now, that approach led to the widespread corruption of government officials, police officers, and even journalists, making it very difficult for authorities to take effective action against him. It was at this point that his reign was marked with extreme violence, ordering assassinations of politicians, judges, and law enforcement officers who opposed him. The most infamous was the bombing of the Avianca Flight 203 in 1989, which killed 107 people as part of an attempt to eliminate a presidential candidate. And if that wasn't enough, what about all the numerous car bombings and assassinations throughout Colombia, contributing to the country's reputation as being one of the most dangerous places in the world during his peak? Now, despite his criminal activities, Escobar sought to legitimize his image and gain political power. In the early 80s, he was elected as an alternate member of the Colombian Congress, leveraging his wealth to fund social programs and build housing for the poor. He garnered significant support from the lower classes, who saw him as this Robin Hood-like figure. However, his political career was short-lived, as he was expelled from Congress in 1984. After his criminal background was publicly exposed. By the late 80s, the Colombian government, with significant support from the U.S., intensified efforts to dismantle the Medellin cartel. Now, the U.S. provided financial aid, training, and equipment to Colombian law enforcement agencies. This would help the government create a special police task force known as the Search Block, dedicated to capturing Escobar. In all his wealth and power, Escobar responded by declaring war on the Colombian government, as he unleashed a new wave of violence that would include bombings, assassinations, and kidnappings. The situation escalates to the point where the government was forced to negotiate with Escobar, leading to his surrender in 1991 under the condition that he would be housed in a self-designed prison, La Catedral. But as we all know, his imprisonment was just a farce, as he continued to run his drug empire from within those prison walls. looking more like a luxurious hideout. Now, when authorities attempted to move him to a more secure facility in 1992, Escobar escaped, triggering a massive manhunt. Unfortunately, his downfall would come with the formation of a dangerous gang, Los Pepes, those persecuted by Pablo Escobar, a gang composed of his enemies, including rival cartel members, former associates, and even members of the Colombian police and military. With intel and support from the DEA, Los Pepes conducted a brutal campaign against Escobar and his associates. By December 2, 1993, after 16 months on the run, Escobar was tracked down by the search block in Medellin, and in a rooftop chase, he was shot and killed, marking the end of the Medellin cartel and the reign of the man once known as the King of Cocaine.
Sandra Avila Beltran.
Debió ser detenida, no regresar a ser Sandra, a ser detenida, allá no huir.
Rightly nicknamed the Queen of the Pacific or the Queen of the South, Sandra Avila Beltran was one of the most successful female drug lords of all time, but her exploits attracted evil eyes, especially those from rival gangs, which led to several attempts to get rid of her. And even after the killing of her husbands by assassins, allegedly from rival gangs, and the kidnap of her son, the persistence in her mode of operation led to her end. Born October 16, 1960 in Baja California, Mexico, to Maria Luisa Beltran Felix and Alfonso Avila Quintero. Sandra's relations, both from her father's side, which is the relation to Rafael Caro Quintero, a former boss of the Guadalajara cartel, and her kinship with the Beltran Leyva brothers, the then top heads of the Sinaloa Cartel Federation, was a catalyst to her criminal foundation. Now imagine being related to these drug kingpins and also being a niece to Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, the one who's said to be the godfather and boss of bosses of the Mexican drug trade, and having a great uncle like Juan Jose Quintero Payan, then you would know that not only was Sandra born into luxury and wealth, but she had the backing and the experience of the criminal world and the drug business as a whole. You see, for Sandra, the line between her everyday life and the criminal underworld was pretty blurry, leaving her in the middle, only for a short while. She not only witnessed the entire operation at a young age, but by 13, she had seen her first shooting, exposing her to the very violent nature of the operations. So in a bid to give her life meaning, Sandra tried to get an education, and as all her childhood friends rose through the ranks of the then Sinaloa cartel, Sandra chose to study communications at the Universidad Autónoma de Guadalajara. But having such a background stirred her right back to a life of crime and narcotics by the age of 21, where her dreams of career journalism died after she was kidnapped by her jealous boyfriend who had ties to the cartel. Now at this point, there was no going back for Sandra Beltran, as the incident opened her eyes to the kind of power the cartel had over people in Mexico. Now the drug business became her new calling, and her new ambition was to rise through the ranks, to get to the top of the food chain as the third-generation drug trafficker that she was. A solid backing of powerful members coupled with her intelligence and personality gave Beltran the edge she needed to carve out a space for herself in a world that men predominantly dominated. And by becoming a socialite in the Mexican drug trade, she would make friends with Juan Mata Ballesteros and Alberto Cecilia Falcon, as well as with their families. So in 1984, in a meeting with the heads of the Cali cartel, Miguel Angel used Sandra Beltran as a business representative, and he even promised her to give her a 20% of Tijuana as compensation, but he double-crossed her and gave it to the Arellana Felix brothers. Well, that got her angry, so she turned against him and looked for partnership elsewhere, which she found in Enedina Arellano Felix. But the partnership didn't go as well, as Enedina went back to join her siblings and offered a bribe of $6 million to Sandra for her to leave Tijuana. So being as ambitious as she was, Sandra rejected that offer and decided to transport cocaine by herself. In retribution, Enedina sent corrupt police officers to arrest Sandra to put a stop to her advancement in the business for a while. But still, she bounced back to eminence as an important deal maker for the Sinaloa cartel and the Norte del Valle cartel. Now, one impressive method that she used for cocaine transportation was the use of tuna boats, a reliable method, transporting millions of dollars worth of cocaine every month. Now, that practically earned her the name the Queen of the Pacific, as the movement of these tuna boats went undetected for several years. Sandra was said to have had affairs with a couple of drug lords throughout her youth. Along the line, she would eventually marry two husbands who were once police commanders, but would later venture into the world of narcotics, and due to Sandra's exploits in the drug business, especially during the Mexican drug wars, both of her husbands were killed by hired assassins. Now, her first one was killed in a shootout, and the second was stabbed right through the heart. But even at that, Sandra continued to run the business and live her life the best way possible. In addition to her preferred tight jeans and high heels, the raven-haired Sandra Beltran was known for wearing a gold pendant of King Tutankhamun, studded with 83 rubies, 228 diamonds, and 189 sapphires. Despite her luxurious accessories, she consistently claimed to be a mere affluent homemaker in Guadalajara, earning a livelihood through property rentals and clothing sales. In 2002, due to her vicious escapades during the reign as narco queen, her end came when her son got kidnapped by gangsters she had stepped on, whom she paid the sum of $5 million in ransom without flinching. That raised a couple of eyebrows, all wondering how this humble homemaker got that kind of cash. On September 28, 2007, following the ransom she paid, Sandra was arrested and charged with helping her Colombian boyfriend sell drugs and launder money through a string of tanning salons she owned called Electric Beach. During her arrest, 30 Mexican federal agents descended upon a posh Mexican City restaurant where she was just enjoying a cup of coffee. Before they took her away, she persuaded them to just let her touch up her makeup so she could look good for that mugshot. You could even see her flicking her hair back and smiling in her arrest video. Even after pleading guilty to the crime, she found the spotlight hard to resist. As she told the judge at one of her first hearings in Mexico, "It's nice to be called a queen." In 2011, all the drug charges were dropped, and after serving time in both Mexican and U.S. prisons for a total of 7 years, as of February 2015, Sandra Avila Beltran, the woman known as the Queen of the Pacific, is free, living a quiet life in Guadalajara, or so we think. El Ondeando, a nickname he adopted because he lost his mind, a state stemming from losing someone dear to him. Now, that mental state drove him into a violent fury, leading him to a point of no return. Born on the 3rd of September 1958 in the town of Llanos del Refugio in Cozalá, Sinaloa, Jose Manuel Torres Felix started working for the Sinaloa cartel since 1990, but ascended to a high-ranking position after the capture of his brother, Javier Torres Felix, in 2004. Coupled with Ovidio Guzman Lopez, the son of Joaquin Guzman Lora, Torres Felix managed the trafficking of drugs from South America into the Mexican states of Chiapas and Oaxaca. In September 2008, during Operation Sinaloa, the Mexican military discovered a safe house owned by Torres Felix, where they seized several firearms, narcotics, radio communication equipment, and even an armored vehicle. They would find a photo of Torres Felix with his nephew, Misael Torres Urea, nicknamed LM2, who's the son of Javier Torres Felix. So on June 1st, 2011, the U.S. government placed Torres Felix on the most wanted drug traffickers list under the Foreign Narcotics Kingpin Designation Act, alongside Gonzalo Inzunza, El Macho Prieto, another high-ranking lieutenant of the Sinaloa cartel. It would be at this point that the PGR, or the Attorney General's Office, offered up to 3 million Mexican pesos for information leading to their arrests. At that time, Manuel Torres Felix was known to live in the hills and valleys of Sinaloa, rarely visiting urban areas, as he often went 2 or 3 days without sleep, always trying to be alert. The beginning of his end came when he crossed paths with the Beltran Leyva organization, a gang known for their ruthlessness in dealing with their counterparts and rivals alike. On April 18, 2008, Torres Felix gained public attention after this gang assassinated his son, Atanasio Torres Acosta, in an ambush attack, injuring his daughter, Alondra, and sister-in-law, Sandra Rivas Heredia. As if that wasn't enough, they even left a written message at the crime scene on behalf of Arturo Beltran Leyva, saying, "On behalf of your friend Arturo and his nephews Los Zetas, so you can understand, Manuel Torres." Following the death of his son, Torres Felix went crazy and took revenge on the perpetrators as he tortured them in his own home. It was Anastasio's death as we know it that marked the beginning of the cartel war in Sinaloa. As a result of this rage, Torres Felix became one of the most dangerous drug traffickers in Sinaloa, leading to hundreds of deaths being attributed to the commandos he led. It was here that he earned the nickname El Ondeado, the crazy one, because understandably when he lost his son he lost his mind. His end truly came though, when his rage led him to a clash with the Mexican army in the community of Oso Viejo in Culiacan, Sinaloa, on October 13, 2012. A clash he couldn't live to narrate, as he was gunned down and killed. After the shootout, the military confiscated several stashes of weapons, ammunition, and other materials in his possession. After his death, Torres Felix's body was taken to the San Martin funeral home in Culiacan, where family and friends gathered to pay their respects. The Mexican army guarded the area and set up checkpoints in the surrounding streets. Subsequently, Torres Felix was buried in Jardines del Umaya, a cemetery near Culiacan, where his son Anastasio is also buried. May 8, 2008, one of the most feared drug lords in history, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, faced the consequences of despair after losing someone dear because of the violence he initiated against a rival gang. However, his despair wouldn't stop here, as it would be one out of many losses suffered by him and the Sinaloa cartel. Let's go back to April 4, 1957 in La Tuna, a small village in the municipality. Joaquin Archibaldo Guzman Lora, El Chapo, grew up in a poor family and had a difficult childhood. He started off in marijuana fields, working alongside his father at a young age, which introduced him to the drug trade. By the late 70s, Guzman began working with Hector Luis Palma Salazar, a drug trafficker, teaching him the logistics of that drug trade. Guzman showed aptitude for the business, managing logistics and ensuring that shipments arrived on time. His big break would come in the 80s when he joined the Guadalajara cartel, led by Miguel Gallardo, also known as El Padrino. Following the Godfather's arrest in '89, the Guadalajara cartel splintered, and Guzman seized the opportunity to establish his own organization. He co-founded the Sinaloa cartel, named it after his home state, with other traffickers including Ismael El Mayo Zambada and Juan Jose El Azul Esparragoza Moreno. The Sinaloa cartel quickly rose to prominence, becoming one of the most powerful drug trafficking organizations in the world. So in a bid to succeed, Guzman employed innovative smuggling techniques, transporting cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and marijuana into the U.S. He pioneered the USA tunnels, running under the U.S.-Mexico border, practically undetected. These tunnels were often equipped with lighting, ventilation, and even rail systems. The ingenuity and ruthlessness would help the Sinaloa cartel dominate the drug trade, but this all came at a heavy price. In 1989, Guzman's envoy, Armando Lopez, was killed by Ramon Arellano Felix, sparking immense violence. And to add to the flame, the Arellano Felix brothers began targeting Guzman's allies, including the brutal murder of Hector Palma's family. Guzman and Palma followed up with a retaliation which included 9 killings in 1992, extending the violence even further. Guzman's violence wouldn't stop here, though. In early 2008, Guzman allegedly turned on Alfredo Beltran Leyva before they fully became a cartel, and a brother to Arturo Beltran Leyva. Soon after, Guzman's eldest son, Edgar, known as El Chapito, was shot dead with an AK-47 in the parking lot of a shopping mall, a death that was believed to be ordered by Arturo Beltran Leyva himself. This set off a deadly turf war, as Guzman would continue to dominate the drug trade. If we go back to '93, Guzman was captured in Guatemala and extradited to Mexico, where he was sentenced to 20 years in prison for drug trafficking, bribery, and criminal association. However, his time behind bars did little to hinder his operations, as he would continue to run things from the prison, using bribery and intimidation to maintain control. So by 2001, Guzman would escape from the maximum security Puente Grande prison in Jalisco. And of course, this escape was facilitated by corrupt prison officials and involved Guzman being smuggled out in a laundry cart. His escape would mark the beginning of a dramatic 13-year period, during which Guzman evaded capture, continuing to expand his empire and influence. However, when he was recaptured in February 2014 by Mexican authorities in Mazatlan, Sinaloa, after a joint operation involving the Mexican Navy and the U.S. DEA, we still see that despite the capture, Guzman's reign was far from over. By July 2015, he made another audacious escape, this time from the Altiplano max security prison in Almoloya de Juarez, Mexico. He escaped through a mile-long tunnel that led straight into the shower area of his cell. The tunnel was equipped with a motorcycle on the rail, providing a quick exit. But months on the run, Guzman was again recaptured in 2016 in Los Mochis, Sinaloa, following a shootout with Mexican Marines. This time, authorities took extra precaution to prevent another escape, and in January 2017, Guzman was extradited to the U.S. to face charges on drug trafficking, money laundering, and murder. His trial began in November 2018 in Brooklyn, New York, and it was one of the most high-profile drug cases in history, with testimonies from numerous former associates, law enforcement officials, and experts. The trial exposed the inner workings of the Sinaloa cartel, revealing details about Guzman's operations, violence, and corruption. In February 2019, Guzman was found guilty on all counts, including engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise, drug trafficking, and use of firearms. In July 2019, he was given life in prison plus 30 years. He also had to forfeit $12.6 billion. Currently, we all know where he is, serving his sentence at the U.S. Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility, ADX, in Florence, Colorado, better yet known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies.